Welcome to the Haven Collective. I'm J.R. Foresteros, and this is the Beacon Bit. This week, we're reflecting on Revelation chapter 7. I want to begin by remembering that we're in the midst of an historic attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our culture. It's something that's been pushed in a lot of areas of our culture for a number of years, working on making sure that we have more voices at the table, making sure that everyone has what they need in order to participate fully, and making sure that we're not marginalizing people, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. But under the current administration, a lot of that has been rolled back, not just at the federal level, but then we've seen a lot of corporations following suit as well. And I think it's important for us to talk about because these values, diversity, equity, and inclusion, though they're not language that we find in the scriptures, they are things that matter very deeply to God, and therefore they should matter to the people of God. Of course, if you've been around Haven for very long, you know that diversity is one of our core values, though we refer to it as collective liberation, precisely because we wanted to push beyond things like quotas or doing things to check boxes, right? But we really want to make sure that we are working for the good of the most vulnerable, because it's only then that we're truly working for the good of everyone. And so you can see God's desire for diversity in the text in Revelation today. We're in Revelation chapter 7, and if you were with us last week, then you remember that we were in chapter 5, and we saw this, the scroll being held in God's hand, and it had seals on it, and it represented God's will on the earth, God's plan to bring justice and equity to everyone, and no one could open the scroll, and everyone was sad, and then Jesus comes in as the always slaughtered lamb, and everyone says, oh, he is worthy to open the scroll. So then in chapter 6, that's exactly what we see happening. The lamb begins unsealing the scroll, and as the lamb breaks each of the 7 seals on the scroll, various things on earth start to go crazy because we're watching what happens when the empire begins to collapse, when justice is brought to the world. And so as death and destruction begin to rain down on the wicked, this question is asked: who can stand against the wrath of the Lamb? Who's going to be safe when Jesus begins to enact justice? And chapter 7 is the answer to that question. So there's some really fun wordplay that goes on where as the scroll is being unsealed, there is a certain group of people who is being sealed or protected from all of the harm that's going on. And then Revelation does something really fun, which is important to note. Throughout the book so far, there's been this interplay between things that are happening in the realm of heaven and then things that are happening on earth. So John, the Revelator, is writing a letter to churches that live on earth, right? They live in the Roman province of Asia, modern-day Turkey. But then John is taken up into the heavenly throne room, and he's seeing what's going on sort of behind the scenes, right? What's going on in heaven as things are happening on earth. And so for the rest of this vision cycle, there's this interplay between John seeing something happening in heaven and then how its counterpart is happening on earth. So, the seals are unsealed in heaven, and then the 4 horsemen come out, or there's a great earthquake or something like that. But there's this one-to-one correlation between these two. And the same happens in chapter 7. On earth, in response to this question, who can withstand the wrath of the Lamb, John sees 144,000 people who receive this seal of safety. And they're 12,000 people from each of the tribes of Israel. Now, that actually sounds like a movement against DEI, right? Because it's 12,000 Jews. It is a particular ethnic group, and it's only them, right? It's this small, again, relatively small, right? Only 144,000 people out of the whole world who get safety here. So that would seem, right, like exactly the opposite of what we value. And yet, when John looks in heaven, there is a counterpart to this 144,000 on earth. And it's the people from our reading today. It is this countless multitude of people from every race and nation and language. It's people from every people group. And they're all worshiping the Lamb and celebrating together. And they are the divine counterpart to the 144,000. They're the heavenly version of what John is seeing on earth. It's this powerful moment when God insists that diversity was always part of God's plan, that the way things are in heaven, is diversity, that there are people from every ethnic group, every language, every culture being brought together and worshiping the Lamb together. Now, it matters that this is in heaven because in the book of Revelation, heaven represents what's most truly true. That's why our series is called Heaven is a Place on Earth, because the whole book of Revelation, spoilers for the end of the book, is about heaven coming down to earth and the two becoming one. It's why Jesus taught us to pray in the Lord's Prayer, may your kingdom come and your will be done here on earth the same way it is in heaven, right? Heaven is our template. Heaven is our model. Whatever we see to be true in heaven is what we should be working towards together on earth. So if we see that in heaven, God's design is diversity, is inclusion, is equity for all people, then we should be working for that here on earth as well. The church should always have been the biggest champion of DEI, long before it was trendy, long before it was something that corporations were glomming onto, and long before the federal government decided that it was anti-American. That should not matter to us. What should matter is that it matters to God, and it's always mattered to God, and it's always been part of the plan from the beginning when God said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the whole earth. This is God's plan. And so, yes, we should absolutely be skeptical of DEI movements that are about checking quotas or doing things performatively without genuinely making things equitable and inclusive. Of course, we should be skeptical of all of those things. I think we've all seen examples of that. But what we should be championing is a world and a community where nobody is left out, where the people who are the most vulnerable are the ones who receive the most care and attention, where we celebrate diversity because it's genuinely better, because our lives are enriched when everything is not the same. We should reject communities that are homogenous because they're too small, they're too easy, they're too short-sighted. There's a deep inauthenticity that happens in homogenous communities. There's a beauty and a richness that can only come when we value, celebrate, and intend for communities to be truly diverse. Now, I know this is difficult. I know it's challenging in all of its own ways. And so I look forward to discussing this with you in our beacons, because this is what Haven aspires to be. And I think we've done some good things, but I think we can always be asking how we can do this better. So I can't wait to talk about this with you. I can't wait to celebrate the beauty of diversity with you this week. And I can't wait to explore with you how we might continue to do that better. Until then, grace and peace be with all of you.